Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
The day I stepped into my first HOA board meeting, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The stuffy conference room at the local community center buzzed with tension as I took my seat among the other board members. I'd lived in Sunnyside Estates for 3 years, watching our once pristine neighborhood slowly crumble around us. Overgrown landscaping, peeling paint on common structures, and a general air of neglect had become the norm. "Welcome, everyone," droned Barbara, our long-standing HOA president, as she adjusted her glasses and glanced at her neatly typed agenda. Her voice carried the bored inflection of someone who'd repeated the same opening for decades. "Let's begin with roll call," she added with a sigh that practically begged to be anywhere else. "Barbara, do we really need to do this every time?" muttered Frank, a grizzled older man who sat in the corner with his arms crossed, glaring at her. "We all know who's here." Barbara shot him a withering look over the rims of her glasses. "Yes, Frank, it's protocol." She paused and added dryly, "and it wouldn't hurt you to try showing up on time for once. Maybe then you'd appreciate why we stick to protocol." Frank grunted but said nothing, sinking deeper into his chair. "All right then," Barbara continued, ignoring him. "Roll call. Karen?" "Here," Karen chirped brightly from the front row, waving a hand as if she were a star pupil. "Frank," Barbara said flatly, not bothering to look up this time. "You already know I'm here," he replied, his tone as gruff as ever. Barbara sighed audibly. "Noted. Linda, present," Linda said softly, fiddling with the edge of her notebook. And so it went, Barbara methodically checking off names with a monotony that set the tone for yet another excruciatingly dull HOA meeting. As Barbara rattled off names, I couldn't help but notice the smug expressions on the faces of the management company representatives. They sat at the head of the table, laptops open, looking more like corporate executives than stewards of our community. When my name was called, I raised my hand, feeling every eye in the room briefly flicker in my direction. "Present," I said, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach that threatened to take flight. Barbara barely glanced up from her clipboard. "Noted," she said curtly, her tone dismissive. I took a deep breath, determined to hold on to my resolve. This was my chance to make a difference, and I wasn't going to let her indifference derail me. "Actually, Barbara," I began, my voice firmer now, "if I may, I'd like to bring something up once we get to the open floor section." Barbara looked up, her eyebrows raised in mild irritation. "We're not there yet," she said flatly. "I know," I replied quickly, forcing a polite smile. "I just wanted to make sure it wasn't overlooked." "Noted," she repeated with an air of finality, clearly unimpressed. Karen, seated 2 rows ahead, turned slightly to flash me an exaggerated smile. "Oh, this should be," she whispered loudly to Linda, who stifled a giggle. I clenched my jaw, ignoring the heat rising in my cheeks. This was my moment, and no amount of passive-aggressive snickering was going to stop me. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that the management company, Pristine Properties, had a chokehold on our HOA. Every suggestion for improvement was met with excuses about budget constraints or logistical difficulties. When I brought up the state of our common areas, the lead representative, Mark, barely looked up from his screen. "We conduct weekly inspections as per our contract," he stated flatly. "If there are specific concerns, please submit them through the proper channels." I couldn't believe my ears. "Weekly inspections? I've lived here for 3 years and never once seen anyone from your company walking the grounds." Mark's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you're not home during our inspection times." "I work from home," I countered, "and I'm not the only one who's noticed the lack of maintenance." Barbara cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. "Let's move on to the next item on the agenda, shall we?" But I wasn't ready to let it go. "Before we do, I'd like to know why our dues are being used to correct years of neglect. Shouldn't Pristine Properties be held accountable for failing to maintain our community?" The room fell silent. Other board members shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact. It was clear this wasn't the first time someone had raised these concerns, but it might have been the first time anyone had done so directly. Mark's face flushed red. "Our company has faithfully served this community for over 2 decades. We take our responsibilities very seriously. Then why are our tennis courts cracked and unusable? Why is the playground equipment rusted and dangerous? Why has the clubhouse roof been leaking for months?" I pressed. Barbara intervened. "These are complex issues that require careful consideration. We can't just throw accusations around without proper evidence. I pulled out my phone. I have plenty of evidence. Photos, dated emails I've sent to Pristine Properties about these issues, even video of the leak in the clubhouse. Would you like to see? Mark slammed his laptop shut. This is highly irregular. Board members aren't supposed to conduct their own investigations or communicate outside of official meetings. Why not? I challenged. We live here. We see the problems every day. Are we supposed to ignore them until you decide to acknowledge them? The meeting devolved into chaos after that. Other board members, emboldened by my outburst, began voicing their own frustrations. Years of pent-up resentment came pouring out. Barbara tried desperately to regain control, but it was too late. In the weeks that followed, I became a pariah to the old guard but a hero to many of my neighbors. I started organizing community meetings, separate from the official HOA gatherings, where residents could voice their concerns and brainstorm solutions. Pristine Properties fought back hard. They sent cease and desist letters, claiming I was violating HOA bylaws by inciting unrest in the community. But I wasn't about to back down. I dug deeper into our HOA's finances, uncovering years of questionable spending and sweetheart deals with contractors connected to Pristine Properties. The more I discovered, the more determined I became to expose the truth. My persistence paid off when local news caught wind of the story. Suddenly, our little neighborhood dispute was headline news. Reporters camped out at the entrance to our subdivision, hoping to catch a glimpse of the HOA whistleblower. The attention forced the HOA board to take action. An emergency meeting was called, and this time, the room was packed with angry residents demanding answers. Barbara looked shell-shocked as she called the meeting to order. We're here to address the recent concerns raised about our management company and the state of our community. Mark from Pristine Properties was conspicuously absent. In his place sat a team of lawyers, their expressions grim. I stood up, armed with a thick folder of documents. I think it's time we had a frank discussion about where our money has been going and why our community has been allowed to fall into such disrepair. For the next 3 hours, we went through years of financial records, maintenance logs, and resident complaints. The lawyers tried to intervene, citing confidentiality agreements and threatening legal action, but the tide of resident anger was too strong to stem. By the end of the night, it was clear that major changes were needed. A motion was passed to terminate Pristine Properties' contract, pending a full audit of their work. Barbara, seeing the writing on the wall, resigned as president. As I left the meeting, exhausted but exhilarated, a group of neighbors approached me. "Thank you," one woman said, tears in her eyes. "We've been feeling helpless for so long." I should have felt triumphant, but the reality of what lay ahead was daunting. We had a long road ahead to repair the damage done to our community, both physically and emotionally. Trust had been broken, and it would take more than fresh paint and repaired tennis courts to restore it. The following months were a whirlwind of activity. We formed committees to oversee different aspects of the community's restoration. Volunteers came out in droves to help with landscaping and minor repairs. We hired a new management company, one with a track record of transparency and responsiveness. But not everyone was happy with the changes. A vocal minority, mostly longtime residents who had been friendly with Barbara and the old board, resisted at every turn. They spread rumors that I was planning to dramatically increase dues or sell off common areas to developers. The stress began to take its toll on me. Late-night phone calls, angry confrontations in the grocery store, even vandalism to my car. It seemed there was no escape from the drama I had unleashed. My partner, who had initially supported my crusade, began to question whether it was worth it. "You're not sleeping. You're barely eating," they said one night. "Is this really how you want to spend your life?" I didn't have a good answer. I knew I was doing the right thing, but at what cost? The final straw came when I discovered that Pristine Properties wasn't going down without a fight. They filed a lawsuit against me personally, claiming defamation and breach of contract. The HOA's insurance refused to cover my legal fees, leaving me on the hook for thousands of dollars. As I sat in my living room, staring at the stack of legal papers, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. The community was in upheaval, relationships were strained, and now I was facing financial ruin. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my thoughts. I opened the door to find a group of neighbors standing on my porch, arms laden with casseroles and bottles of wine. "We heard about the lawsuit," one of them said. "We wanted you to know you're not alone in this." Their support was touching, but it didn't erase the reality of my situation. I had set out to fix our community, but in many ways, things felt more broken than ever. As the sun set on another tumultuous day in Sunnyside Estates, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the price of standing up for what's right? And more importantly, was I willing or able to keep paying it? The story of our HOA's transformation was far from over, and I was beginning to realize that there might not be a happy ending, at least not for me. But as I looked out at the freshly mowed common area and the newly repaired playground equipment, I knew that regardless of the personal cost, I had set something important in motion. The future of Sunnyside Estates was uncertain, but one thing was clear: things would never be the same again. Whether that was for better or worse remained to be seen. I very briefly, thankfully, did a stint working for a management company with HOAs. Without going into detail, the management company worked for the HOA and take final instructions from them. I have seen numerous HOAs ignore management advice and attempts to carry out improvements because they like to keep their outgoings looking low and their sinking funds healthy. Not saying this management company isn't shit, but some poor manager could well be getting a ton of abuse from OP when his real issue is the other HOA members. I've very rarely seen HOA that actually seem to work. All HOA members have their own personal agendas that very rarely align. Unfortunately, the role attracts self-appointed know-it-alls without any relevant qualifications for the job. Just keep in mind it is all the board's responsibility. If the management company isn't doing their job properly, blame the board. Any expenses from neglect, of course, come from the dues. The management company does not spend their money on the HOA. The first thing you should do is get the board to step up and take back control. The management company has just hired help. You're being silly. If you're going to get nasty, then at least get informed. Board discussion outside meeting are illegal and violate transparency laws in certain states. Your state is probably one of them. If you want the board or management to respect your opinion, at least don't suggest actions that violate the law. Getting management to cover costs? Good luck dreaming. Read your CC&Rs. Management works under the direction of the board. If the board didn't raise dues or save for reserves or make a plan to replace deteriorating common areas, that's on the board. It's the board's duty to manage the company to tell them what to do. A weekly physical inspection also doesn't eliminate deterioration of the common area. Hire a reserve company whose job is to specialize in inspecting and creating a report.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.